You know, there's some people who are actually in comas and their faces really get frozen like that, really. Come on, man.
Hi, everyone. Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review. Death Grips, the Money Store. Death Grips is a Sacramento-based experimental hip-hop trio featuring MC Ride on vocals and Zach Hill and Flatlander kind of handling the production behind things. And the mixtape they put out last year, Ex-Military, ended up being my second favorite album of the year when it came time to do lists. And the reason this landed as second in my favorite albums of the year is because it's such a forward-thinking hip-hop album. I'm not trying to say that it was really socially conscious or it's trying to save hip-hop. If Death Grips and Ex-Military were trying to save hip-hop, they were definitely going about it in a really weird way, because that album to me just takes all of hip-hop's worst stereotypes and turns them up to a deafening volume. Everything becomes extreme, from the overmodulation of really heavy bass in the beats to the overuse of violence and aggression in the lyrics and the vocal delivery, with MC Ride just really reaching levels of serial killer psycho insanity. I would say Death Grips definitely takes influence from Bomb Squad style production that was put together for some of Public Enemy's best releases and songs, as well as the really testosterone-soaked cutthroat aggression that was on Wu-Tang's first album, 36 Chambers. But Death Grips has taken these things so far that what they're making is no longer just hip-hop, but hip-hop blended with elements of noise and industrial music and jittery electronica. Yeah, The Money Store definitely has roots in traditional hip-hop, but it is not an album for hip-hop traditionalists. The beats, for one, are so freaking noisy, sharing a lot of characteristics with the solo albums that Zach Hill has been releasing over the years since Hella has kind of cooled down. And the vocals, the lyrics, just get swallowed in all of this chaos created by the instrumentals. And the screaming vocal delivery of MC Ride just distorts the lyrics even further. If you do concentrate really hard, the lyrics on this thing are slightly readable. You do kind of get a grasp as to maybe what's sort of being said, but Death Grips is fully conscious of this and how important lyrics and stories are in hip-hop, which I think is part of why the trio continues to post its lyrics in full with every single new song that they release. And they're lyrics worth reading into because they add a whole different dynamic to the aggression that Death Grips presents. The aggression and the violence that's glorified in a lot of hip-hop music, especially in the mainstream, with this album is just brought to such a high, it becomes a grim reality. Not something to admire, not something to like. In his lyrics, MC Ride kind of paints himself as this character who is very violent, paranoid, intoxicated nearly all the time, and living an extremely low-life lifestyle. Kind of like the cover of this album, it's something that feels like it's coming straight out of a really gritty graphic novel. I could see all of MC Ride's exploits on this LP in the lyrics being depicted in really stark black and white images, depicting bodies and bullets and blades and blood spray. It's the kind of stuff that to me people would usually label horrorcore, but because of how extreme Death Grips is sonically and vocally, they totally sidestep that label. Because now that this album has kind of set the bar a little bit higher, anybody walking down that road might as well be making Halloween music. MC Ride's lyrics do kind of function beyond just gore, though, like on the song Get Got, where he's kind of imagining police going after him that aren't really there. And on the track I've Seen Footage, he raps about the police brutality and violence that he's seen that kind of fuels that paranoia. The track Lost Boys sort of seems to be this really dark tribute to anybody who's lost themselves in a gutter esque lifestyle. Brown baggers, thieves, drug dealers, highlighting with the hook just how far people can fall. On the track Hacker, the lyrics are so out there and disconnected, simultaneously name-dropping WikiLeaks, Tesla, and Lady Gaga in a way that kind of feels really glitchy and disorienting, which the song title kind of asserts. And the track System Blower kind of seems to be a bit of a double entendre. Obviously, a car system comes to mind, and that is referenced in the lyrics, but with how violent MC Ride gets with his words on a lot of verses in this track, to me it kind of feels like he's also pointing his anger at the construct of systems, possibly. Those tracks are great. Those tracks are fine. But most of this album is loaded with violent, make sure a parent is around kind of content. Blood-curdling images of cinder blocks being tied to feet and being tortured, and blades again, scars, bubonic plague, fire, war, bare-knuckle brawls with people who are at punk weight. Sitting all the way through this album can be a lot like A Clockwork Orange, and you're kind of tied to your chair and your eyelids are peeled back and you're just being exposed to all of this horrifying, soul-rotting imagery. Sometimes the lyrics can be really over the top, like on the track Bitch Please, where the hook goes like, "Bitch please, you must be smoking rock." But that's kind of part of this really trashy, unapologetic character that MC Ride depicts. He's supposed to be an unlikable bastard. I can't help but compare the character on this album to like Waka Flocka Flame, except actually scary and aggressive and dangerous. Not this slick, money-making gangsta image of aggression. But no matter how gory the lyrics get, MC Ride is a character. He is also a narrator. He can't be him, if you know what I'm saying. Because I don't know of many drug-addicted, cold-blooded killer street dwellers who would use the words basilisk or lycanthropy in their rap verses. The last thing I want to say about the lyrics, though, is that Death Grips just knows how to write a hell of a hook. Aye. Get, got. I'm in your area. It's such a long way down. Double. Every track on here is amazingly catchy, which is a feat considering how ugly and harsh and uninviting this album is. If you can withstand the force, a lot of these tracks are going to stick with you. It's kind of like wanting to join a gang and then, of course, upon entry you get hazed and beaten up and abused, but once you kind of make it through that initial rough spot, you're in the gang and everything's cool. On some tracks here, MC Ride's verses and flow get really fast, like in the song Get God or Double Helix. He makes use of the more kind of normal or quiet registers in his voice too when rapping on those songs, which really gives this album a lot more variety in comparison with Ex-Military. Of course, the lyrics, no matter what register they're delivered at, would not mean much if not for Death Grips' production. And I would say if there's one thing on this album that is done to perfection, it is to stick with Death Grips' usual style without bringing me into any major bouts of deja vu in relation to Ex-Military or the EP that came out before. Get Got was the first single to come out from this LP, and Death Grips, I think, really wanted to say, hey, we were going to do something different this time around. Here is our quietest song yet. There are these swirling synthesizers that kind of bleed into one another because of how grainy and lo-fi the sound quality is. The vocals feel just claustrophobically close to the microphone. There are these kind of twittering hi-hat drums in between some of the verses, some very robotically looped vocal skips. I love it. The song Fever, by contrast, the song right after, is just pure hell. The track is like listening to an alarm go off in the middle of an underground government-funded lab where a genetically engineered mutant has just broke out and is on the loose. Zach Hill's drums sound really ragged, and his bass drum patterns on the song are insane. Tons of precision, and the hook on this thing, when the synthesizers come in, it just sounds so slick, just so freaking memorable. The track Lost Boys takes a much different approach from the previous two tracks and is really airy and atmospheric. MC Ride's vocals are just wrapped up in the atmosphere. It sounds like he's rapping from the bottom of a low-life well where all the terrible people he's rapping about live. The beat is so off-kilter on this track. It skips quite literally like a broken record and is really hypnotic because of it. The track right after Blackjack is really mesmerizing too, and the vocals have these kind of Poltergeist-esque vocal sound reversals playing behind the rap verses that gives this song just a really surreal quality. And with this fat synthesizer pulsating in the background with some dissonant synths as well, it just feels like something out of an 80s B slasher movie. Death Grips works on kind of topping its dark and heavy tracks from ex-military like Tachyon with songs on here such as System Blower and The Cage. And Death Grips delivers some serious left hooks on this album too, really surprising me just when I thought I had their style pinned down. Song, kind of example, case in point, I've Seen Footage, which is this track that I feel like kind of was made just to tease the naysayers saying that Death Grips is not hip-hop, because the song, while staying completely Death Grips in just being abrasive, being hip-hop, being just so in your face, the way the drum beat works, the distorted riff, as well as MC Ride's flow, all call out to golden age hip-hop artists like Run DMC, Salt and Peppa, Tone Loc, and the track Hacker has this beat that's kind of like this very danceable 80s style electro funk with MC Ride, I would say kind of rapping, but it sort of feels like spoken word too, because he's really screaming just a lot of disjointed phrases, and more than anything, more than hip hop, the track reminds me of like LCD Sound System, when James Murphy would set up a track with a really strong groove and then just go off on all these really insane ramblings. But, you know, Death Grips is already rapped over a Link Ray sample on ex-military, so at this point, really, anything goes. The track Bitch Please feels really kind of schizophrenic. One moment you're hearing this rising fat synthesizer, the next moment MC Ride is rapping in a Jamaican accent. Every few bars kind of presents a completely different sound. It is just a blender of different ideas. The track Fuck That by far has the oddest groove on this entire thing, right up there with Lost Boys. Man, every track here musically just has its own personality, just its own set of distinct characteristics. There's just so much detail in these instrumentals that gets so minute, it would take hours to explain exactly what's happening with every single track. But despite all this detail, Death Grips music does not really sound all that studied or hoity-toity or anything like that. It's very fun music. It's very straightforward, noisy, catchy, overwhelming, blood-pumping music. It is really visceral. It is really in your face, but once you kind of get a grip of what's going on and you adjust to the intensity, it's easier to step back and see that the album required more of this than it did. Because not only is this LP really heavy and abrasive, but it's also thought-provoking. It's extremely layered and does not give up all of its secrets in the first, second, or even 10th listen, despite being very loud. To be completely honest, I've listened to ex-military a lot of times, but this album still managed to kind of blow my mind. Death Grips material so far has been building a really interesting new sound for hip-hop. I'm not saying they're changing the game or anything like that. I don't think that's the intention of this album at all. Instead, the Money Store looks to kind of forge something for itself. This thing is sitting on a throne of its own design and nobody's watching because the picture is just too horrifying to stare at. From the cover of this album to the lyrics to the vocal delivery to the production, everything about this LP is just unsettling, is disturbing, is surreal. The words twisted and unforgiving come to mind too, but so does the word rewarding. To put it simply, this album is, to me, a sonic portrait of a villain. Villains represent evil, but the thing is, each decade, each generation is going to come up with its own brand of villainy, of its own brand of evil, because the evil and the villains of the previous generations are going to the current generation, feel soft, feel old hat. Things need to be updated. Death Grips, the money store, is that successfully reinvented image of the villain, or just villainy in general. I'm loving this record. Freaking loving this record. Freaking loving this record. Can't really say much else about it. Kind of feeling a strong 9 to a 10 on this LP. What do you guys think of it? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Why? Why do you hate it? Why? Seriously, why do you hate it? And why do you love it too? Why do you love it? Let me know. Anthony Fantano, Death Grips, forever.